Thank you, Joseph. Hopefully everybody can hear me and see the outline that is being shared currently. So my name is Paul Dudley. Just to give you a quick introduction, I work for the State of Tennessee STS, which is Strategic Technology Solutions, GIS Services Group, and we are the centralized IT group for state government. And I'll kind of go into a little bit more about kind of what we do and what our core services are and what our core focuses are. Just a reminder for folks when you're hopping on, if you don't mind just muting your line. So to cover GIS and data and what STS does, I'm going to be covering our services and the data that we have available to the public. I'm also going to be covering our Lidar products, what some use cases are and how you can access that, as well as some mapping imagery, so aerial photography or ortho imagery. Some help and data resources that are out there for you as a GIS user or someone who's just learning, starting to learn how to use GIS data. And then I'm going to pass this off to Suzanne White. Suzanne White is a member of the STS-GIS staff as well, and she's going to be covering a lot of the FEMA data services that are out there, and that'll be really useful to you folks. So I'm going to actually stop my share and change to another screen here. All right. And this is the presentation that I'll be using today. It is what's called an ArcGIS story map, and it is a web link, and you'll be able to get access to this. I'll put this in the chat after I finish speaking, as well as a few other helpful links to you. I know this, Joseph said that this meeting would be recorded, but this will also be an additional resource for you. Suzanne is sharing her presentation in a very similar way. So you'll be able to take this information and share it, throughout your organization, or go back and revisit this after this is all said and done. So I'll speak for hopefully around 40 minutes or so, and then we should have time for questions and maybe a little bit of a time for a break, and then we'll kick it off to Suzanne. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be covering the State of Tennessee's GIS data resources, really trying to give you an overview of all the data that's available, the web map services, so GIS data services that you can bring through the web onto your machine, into your GIS applications or your engineering applications. And as I mentioned, some of those training resources that are available to you. So I hear, at least from looking in the chat, I see some familiar faces. I know that a lot of you are local government users, floodplain administrators, or surveyors, and I really think that this information will be really valuable to you, as well as maybe valuable to others in your organization. So again, I hope you're able to take a deeper dive after this presentation, maybe send this to some coworkers. With that, I'll go ahead and get started. So to give you an overview of STS-GIS, or what is GIS for those of you that aren't familiar. So GIS is a Geographic Information System. That's what GIS stands for. And it is a framework for gathering, managing, and analyzing data. And the big thing is that it emphasizes location, right? Any data that you have, if it has an XYZ location, or if it has a location values, that can be mapped, that can be visualized. And so the history for STS-GIS and really starts with a Tennessee-based mapping program. And it started in 1997 with the base mapping program engaging local governments and coordinating the funding to collect statewide data sets. This imagery in the background is an example of that. Parcels being a statewide parcel fabric, streets and the address point data, as well as a hydrography base maps that we'll talk about later, are just some of the products that have been produced from this program. And you may be familiar with STS-GIS, or as we were formerly known as OIR, which is the Office of Information and Resources. So what are our core things that STS-GIS focuses on now? Well, as I mentioned, we are the centralized IT group. So now we're the centralized GIS group for the state of Tennessee government. And our core functions really are to host and serve state agency data. So we'll take data from the Comptroller, the Treasury, for example, parcel data. They'll send it to us, and we create a feature cache and put that into the property viewer that you may be familiar with, and that I'll discuss in just a moment. We also take data from, let's say, TWRA or Tdot and host that to state agencies, and sometimes we host that as services for the public and local governments to use. We develop and host state agency applications. I mentioned the property viewer, which probably most of you are familiar with.
Meeting I had with the.
I need folks to get on mute.
Who was that
if you
with?
don't mind. Hang on just a second here. Make sure I won't stop sharing. But Joseph, if you don't mind hopping on and see if you can figure out who is on unmuted there.
Yeah, I'm looking for him right now.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, just to move on, we also coordinate statewide GIS data products. So Lidar being one of those, statewide imagery products being another. We also assist local governments, and we have many more functions, development, etc. In our website, any of these links in this presentation are yellow. We also have some buttons in here, but this is our main website, which is Tnmap.tn.gov. If you don't learn anything else today, I hope that you at least take home Tnmap.tn.gov. That's kind of our landing page, and will take you to all of the data and services that we offer. So as I mentioned, we host a lot of data. We host a lot of GIS applications and data services, so you have active links for these. Have the imagery for mapping. I have our elevation and LiDAR data page, and we have our LiDAR training resources. And we'll also discuss applying GIS in local government. So these are kind of just the bullet points of what I'm going to walk through here momentarily and throughout the rest of the presentation. So our application and data services. As I mentioned, and here's a screenshot from the property viewer. This is Comptroller of the Treasury application that we host for them. Again, we receive that data and host it, and host this application. We have a team of developers that help support the different applications that we have. And these are just some of our more popular and larger mapping applications. So we also host the TBI's sex offender registry map. We have the child care locator for the Department of Human Services, a voter lookup for Secretary of State, Civil War project, and sales tax lookup. Other important services and data sets that we offer are accessible on that Tnmap.tn.gov data page. So you'll see that if you go there, and we'll kind of drive through that after this presentation. I'll kind of go through our website and another part of our site that we've recently launched. So we host web map services as well, and that includes administrative boundaries. Here you can see we have city boundaries that we receive from the Comptroller of the Treasury and put those out in a service. We also have the voting districts here. This just in this web map, and some polling locations. And this data is hosted online for you to bring into your server, or, into your map or into your engineering software, depending on what you're using. We have lots of ArcGIS online data sets. For those of you not familiar, Esri is a GIS company, and they're one of the leaders in the GIS industry. And they have some products that are called, ArcGIS Online, ArcMap, ArcGIS Pro. You've probably heard of some of these. But ArcGIS Online gives us an easy way to share some of these data sets, and I'll kind of walk through a little bit of those. We also host some hydrography data that I talked about earlier, that base mapping data. We have elevation data, and we also have some building footprint data, and we'll discuss those here momentarily. So the ArcGIS online resources that we have hosted, we have COVID data out there. This is, you may have seen this map. This is actually serving the Governor's Unified Command dashboard for COVID data. We receive data from the Tennessee Department of Health, and then this data is updated daily whenever Tennessee Department of Health sends us information, and then we host this data in our ArcGIS Online account, as well as serve those web maps. As I mentioned, we have those administrative boundaries and the voting districts. We also have our imagery layers on there, as well as many more. So if you're an Esri user, I push you to go and check out our ArcGIS Online resources. I do want to talk about a service highlight. So as I mentioned, we do have other web services. We have an ArcGIS server instance that you can connect to, which I'll show you in the next part of the demonstration. And the highlight the service I'm gonna highlight is the Comptroller Treasury land use service. So the Comptroller of the Treasury produces a land use classification for parcel data, and they share that information with us. And so we take that data and we create a service that you can bring into your GIS software or your engineering software. But they also have some PDF maps here. So that's been very useful, especially at the local government level. So I wanted to highlight that. The next thing is our Tennessee base mapping program hydrography data, which I've discussed a little bit. Suzanne is going to talk about this in more detail later today. And also the FEMA Map Service Center flood data. I just wanted to put these links in here, just as Suzanne is going to talk a little bit about Lidar and Tnmap.tn.gov, but I'll let her discuss this portion. Okay, so moving on from our, and you can see up here on the top, I gave you that overview. We've gone through the applications and data services that we offer, just a bunch of examples. Now I'm going to talk about elevation and LiDAR data. So if you're not familiar, elevation or LiDAR data is light detection and ranging. It is a remote sensing technique that uses lasers to create elevation data, which you can see here on the right. So basically a plane has a laser sensor on it that shoots down, and it comes in contact with objects, and that laser sensor or pulse is returned back to the plane. And from that, we're able to get an X, Y, and Z location, so an elevation, a point. And from that, we can create many different elevation products, accurate elevation products as well. So this is just a screenshot of downtown Nashville. The points are symbolized pretty heavily, but you can see, we've got some buildings here. You've got the Korean Veterans Bridge here. I believe this is the pedestrian bridge. Looked like there was a boat on the river that day. Over to our right would be the stadium, and then Batman building there. So just wanted to show an example of LiDAR data. We're going to discuss this a little bit later when I show you our other part of our website, so Lidar.tn.gov. And I have some links to that as well. So if you want more information, Lidar.tn.gov is a site that we recently launched, hopefully giving folks easier access and making the data more approachable and easier to understand. So what we have there is we have accuracy information, common use cases, how it's collected, etc. And we'll go through that a little bit. I also have some links to some videos that we've produced. This video in particular will walk you through all of our data. So the Tennessee data is we produce in conjunction with USGS. And USGS has a program called 3DEP, which is the 3D elevation program. And with that comes specific accuracy requirements, all kinds of products, etc. And this video will walk you through that. Again, another link to the LiDAR site. And here are just some of the LiDAR data products that we have. So some of the things that we produce are the 3D point cloud, which I showed you an example of just a second ago up top. Here's another example of the 3D point cloud. This is just showing Nissan Stadium. We also can produce a digital elevation model. Here is a digital elevation model. That's that grayscale in the background. I can turn off the contours here. So as you can see, we've got a digital elevation model, and from that you can see hydro, you can see road lines and trails, etc. So lots of good detail in that. And this is just an example, so it's only a small section. This is one tile. So our LiDAR data is flown, and then it is split into specific tiles. This is one digital elevation model tile. There would be a 3D point cloud associated with that as well. Other data products that we offer, and probably our most popular one besides the digital elevation model, is the contour data. We push people to generate their own contour data using the digital elevation models. We do share some county-wide contours, but it can be a little bit prohibitive to work with because the contour data is so large on a county-wide level. But this is 2-foot contours. There are many use cases for this, especially for site planning, cartography, and base maps, etc. I do also have some building footprints in here. This is just again a subset, but building footprints are a great base map layer that you can add to your GIS and your software. All right. So from that we'll move on. Here's just another example. This is an example of a DEM in a 3D view showing Lookout Mountain in Hamilton County. Again, if you're not familiar with what is LiDAR, I put a link here to that to our LiDAR site. So as far as the products and projects, what covers your area? This is very important for you as a local government entity or a surveyor. You're working on a specific project. You need to know what covers your area and what products and how you can download. So we have this coverage map. This is linked in many places on our website as well as the LiDAR site. But what we have here is multiple projects or multiple flights that cover the state of Tennessee. So, for instance, this is the 2016 East 19 County QL2 project. So 3D data and LiDAR data is put into different quality levels, and that it's basically it has some accuracy requirements, etc., that put it into a quality level 2, which is 2 points per square meter classification. All of our data in Tennessee with the 3D program is QL2 currently. So now we have links to the point cloud download, DEM download, building footprints, as well as some countywide contours. So if I zoom in here, and let's say I'm working in Jefferson County, the more I zoom in, you can see these tile grids come up. And these are going to be important to know whenever you need to download something in particular. So if I'm to click on this specific tile, it's not going to download that specific tile. I'm going to have to drive to this location, which will take me to a Google Drive folder. I'll go to Jefferson County and find that exact tile that I need to download. Here's also a PDF that shows the tile grid as well, just in case you need it. So that kind of introduces you to the projects that cover the state of Tennessee. Currently, we've got the 2016 project, which is a large 3D project. We have started in 2015 here, covering the Cumberland region. That was a 27 county project. We have the Middle Tennessee, which was 2018, which was our most recent collection currently. We have our next one is 2017. That was a West Middle project covering 11 counties. This section right here is a USDA NRCS collect that was collected in 2012. That currently is going to be, well, it was reflown, and hopefully we'll see delivery of new fresh data covering the West Tennessee area here by late summer, so not too long. We also have collects, obviously, covering Shelby County that was collected by Shelby County, and then we have a USDA on RCS 3-county project as well, covering Tennessee. All right, so I'm going to move down now. We talked about the coverage map, and now talk a little bit about some LiDAR training. I'll show you on our website, Lidar.tn.gov, some additional resources as well. But basically, we found that users were needing instruction on how to put this information to use. So we have a LiDAR series basically walking you through how to put this data to use in ArcGIS Pro, which is an Esri product. We also have a video series using the Tennessee LiDAR data derivatives in QGIS. And this one is probably our most popular with surveyors and engineers that don't necessarily have a GIS background or an Esri license. QGIS is a free and open source software that you're able to bring in the digital elevation models, generate contours in a matter of seconds, and then export that out to either a CAD-based file format or just can keep it in QGIS and use it for its GIS capabilities. So there's a video series that will walk you through that. All right, so moving on from elevation and LiDAR data onto imagery for mapping. So we've got, as I discussed, we've got multiple aerial photography products. We have a link here to our imagery website that has a video that will walk you through each one of these products. I do have some of the products here on a web map just to show you some examples. We have our newest, which is Vexcel Imagery, which is a 2019 to 2020 flight. Vexcel has been doing amazing work. They already have flown the entire state for 2021, and we hope to see that updated in our imagery service after they get it processed later this year. So I do have several other imagery layers. So this Vexcel Imagery is, again, that was a 2019-2020 collect in the service currently. That's a 20 centimeter product, source product, and then it is cached down to about 1 to 1,000. We also have a Google Imagery product that has been deprecated, that was collected in 2013 to 2019. Basically, Google decided to stop their statewide imagery program. That's when we moved to Vexcel, but we still have that service available. It's just not going to be updated. We also have a Tdot Imagery Webmercator. That's our Tdot service. So we receive Tdot Imagery. They fly one region of the state annually. Currently, they're trying to deliver West Tennessee. We have 2019 data in East, and then 2016 currently in West, and so that will be updated this year. This is a 1-foot product, and I'm going to go ahead and actually just zoom in a little bit here. So the Tdot, a strong, I guess, distinction between the Tdot and the rest of these imagery products is that the Tdot is typically leaf off, whereas you get a mix with the Vexcel and the Google. And so again, we have multiple products. We also have some Tennessee base map historical imagery. You saw an example of that when I was talking about the overview and the Tennessee base mapping program when it's got started. That is a countywide Mr. Sid in a panchromatic, so it's black and white, and it's a 2-foot resolution. We also have some post-disaster imagery that we receive time to time. Vexcel, for instance, flew the Chattanooga tornadoes as well as the Nashville tornadoes and the tornadoes that went across there in March of 2020. So the Vexel has a program called the Gray Sky Program. And basically, if you have a disaster in an area, if you send us an email, contact us, Tnmap.gis@tn.gov, which I'll have that at the very bottom of this. We'll be able to provide you access, local government entities access to that post-disaster imagery. We also have a few other entities that provide us post-disaster imagery, Tdot aerial surveys. We have some satellite resources, as well as NOAA, who flew the Nashville tornadoes as well. All right, well, this is, oh, there we go. Get started here. There we go. It was on the wrong slide. So applying GIS. So we're moved off of the imagery for mapping, and then we're going to walk through just kind of applying GIS and applying this data, and then I'm going to walk you through our website, and then we'll be ready for questions. So who can this GIS data benefit? And I know I've talked about some pretty, I mean, it's technology you may or may not be familiar with. There's lots of resources out there that can help you. But really, the thing is, we want folks to learn about this data. We want folks to know about this data and how it can be beneficial. So citizens are using this. Planning and zoning offices throughout the state are using this information. ECD, economic and community development groups across the state are using this 2-foot contours to be able to map out an industrial site and not send a survey crew out to do a feasibility study, for instance. Land assessment, engineering departments doing design, putting in a culvert, using the contour data and the digital elevation models to better prepare for putting in that culvert or a new highway. Same thing with utility departments doing some digging, etc. Obviously, a big one here would be that stormwater and floodplain administrators. We're seeing this data put to use, especially with the elevation models, being able to do flood modeling, hydrologic modeling, being able to bring in those 2-foot contours. Emergency management agencies, same thing, being able to use some of these data services and really put them to use in their workflows. Land surveyors, the 2-foot contours, especially standing out there. So those are the folks that can use it, but how do you put this information to use, especially if you're not very familiar with it? Well, there's multiple software available. So we have the Esri ArcGIS products. QGIS, which I mentioned, is that free and open source. There are other GIS softwares out there as well, such as the Blue Marble Global Mapper, and then many engineering software or surveying software. So Bentley MicroStation, Autodesk, AutoCAD, Carlson Survey, many more. And then you can also take this data and put it into website maps. So if your county or local government has a website and they have maps on that website, you can take some of these data layers and either send it to your developers or whoever your contractor is and say, we want you to add this specific data layer into our online map. It would be useful for our citizens. There are many organizations out there to help as well. So I have to plug especially the Tennessee Geographic Information Council. We work hand in hand with them to help share the Lidar data and a lot of the older imagery products. TNGIC, you may have heard of them. So basically, TNGIC pays the bill for us to put terabytes and terabytes worth of data out there on that Google Drive account and share that with the public, which is really powerful. But they have lots of, it's a great resource. It's a community of GIS users that allows you to see what other people are using our data for, what they're producing, what they're doing, and really will increase your knowledge base. There's also the Tennessee County Services Association that has periodic trainings. We presented there the very similar presentation. TNAFPM, obviously, something Joseph was mentioning earlier. Memphis Area Geographic Information Counselor, or MAGIC, also a great community group of GIS users, as well as NetGIS, which is that Northeast Tennessee GIS user group. I also have, just some examples of how people are using this data. I've already talked a little bit about it, but Davidson, Wilson, and Putnam and Hamilton emergency responders were able to receive post-tornado imagery within 48 hours, thanks to our partnership with Vexel, Gray Sky, and the NOAA disaster response imagery. Folks are using this for flood control. Savannah City Engineer, Johnson City, as well as Morristown are using these imagery and contours to provide to their local engineers to save them time and money. ECDs are using it for using the imagery for GIS and dispatch functions. TDOT uses a LiDAR for many things, preliminary site plans, drainage studies, and I even saw Tony Kinder on the participant list, but he's always been so supportive of the products that we've been serving, and he's attended some of the trainings that we have, but he gave us some great feedback, being able to do feasibility studies and conceptual level design to be evaluated quickly, really saving money and time. So thanks, Tony, for your kind words, and thanks for joining us today. Also, contact us. So I've got our Tnmap.tn.gov, our email, that Tnmap.gis, and then mine in particular if you need it, and my contact information. With that, I'm going to move on to just our websites. I showed you a lot of examples and gave you lots of links, but I'll show you how to reach that information as well. So here's our website, Tnmap.tn.gov. Again, I'll share links to all three of these links that I'm going to be talking about. This is our landing page, Tnmap.tn.gov. We have the Tennessee Base Mapping Program, some helpful GIS links. Contact us, GIS data, our applications that I talked about, the property viewer, etc., and then some resources and news and events. All right, so the base mapping program is what I'm going to talk about first. We have the LiDAR project. We have DFIRM TIPS, which is the Tennessee Information for Public Safety. It's kind of migrated into NG911. And then we have our Ortho Imagery. I'm going to hit LiDAR last because it's its own beast, if you will. We just launched a new website portion for that. Do want to focus on that Tennessee Ortho Imagery. So here's that video that I have linked in my presentation. Here's how you gain access to those imagery products. So if you clicked on the Vexel Blue Sky Imagery, it will take you to a specific form basically to fill out. It's just for emergency communications districts, state government, local government, Tennessee Valley Authority, and then the contractors working for those eligible entities. This is sponsored by the Tennessee Emergency Communications Board. Again, those flight dates are most recent, with a flight coming in 2021. And our access for these is via a web map service or web map tile service. I've talked about our web services. That's a specific type of service. So you would basically receive a link, a URL that you would copy and just paste into your GIS software. So QGIS or Esri or even other engineering products. Here's an example of a WMS link. So if I clicked on this, it wouldn't take me anywhere. I'd need to copy and paste this into my GIS. So Tdot Imagery, here's the Tdot Aerial Survey Group. They collect that one region per year. We have that Google Imagery product. If you click on this, it will take you to a request. That historical imagery that I talked about, access through Google Drive, so you can go download whatever county you're in if you need a historical data set. That disaster response imagery I talked about, we have that Gray Sky with the GIC, Geospatial Intelligence Center, that they fly after tornadoes or events. All right, I'm going to go back now and I'm going to go to our GIS data page. So here on our GIS data page, we have links to a lot of our different data sets. This is just another way to access. We have the Ortho Imagery, our LiDAR directory, our DEMs, building footprints, break lines. It's basically where the elevation models and our LiDAR data has been edited. Contours, REST services directory. So this is where I was talking about web map services. We have an ArcGIS server. So we have multiple services, web services that you can access. I'm going to go ahead and click on, I think it's environmental. We have that Comptroller land use service. So this is where you could copy this WMS link, or you could bring this directly into ArcMap or ArcGIS Online. So multiple services there in our REST services directory. I ask you to, if you're an Esri user, especially to go and check out all of those services and see if you can bring them in. This will allow you to give you the connection details on how to get connected to these services. We also have our open data portal. So our open data portal has some more data sets in it that we serve from other state agencies or stuff that we've produced. Like click on environmental here. We have those Tennessee hydro lines and water bodies, which we have linked in multiple places in my presentation, as well as Suzanne's. And I'm just going through and showing you just a few examples. We do have that ArcGIS Online portal if you are an Esri user or ArcGIS Online user. And we have GIS metadata and some sales and contacts. This will walk you through our applications. So we have that general map viewer, property map viewer. That's probably the one that people are most familiar with. And then all those ones that I discussed earlier. All right, I'm going to move on to the Lidar.tn.gov. If you go to the TN map and then go to elevation LiDAR, that will take you there. But that's also, again, pretty easy to remember, Lidar.tn.gov. And this is recently launched. Here we basically have 4 main places to go. Do you need LiDAR information? What is LiDAR? I need more about it. I don't know, I need more information. What are the projects that cover my area, or who has been supporting and coordinating these projects? We have training and using the LiDAR, so putting it to use, and then we have the data downloads. This is something important that I would like to ask folks is if you have been using this LiDAR data, I would love to hear how you're using it. It helps us improve data collection and promote better quality data in the future. So we'll get to know how you're using it. How can we better serve the Tennessee GIS community or LiDAR user community? So we have a use case survey. So if you don't mind, take a few minutes of today after you visit this and fill out this use case survey. Basically, just tell us how you're putting it to use. Also, you can follow this initiative now. So if you want to know when our next training is, or when our next project area is coming in or being served, you can follow this initiative and sign up to basically get on an email list, as well as get some other benefits. We have our contact information down there, and I'm going to walk through just these really quickly. First one being that LiDAR information. So what is LiDAR? This basically gives you that rundown, same example, talks a little bit about it, who can benefit. I've talked about these things already, so I'll kind of move down through. It walks through each one of those data products and the use cases with those. So what can you do with the classified point cloud? What is it? What file type is it served in? So it kind of gives you more information. We can create the LiDAR derivatives. You can do 3D visualization with it, do volumetric analysis, etc. That next product, and I've talked about these already, but I'll still walk through them. Digital elevation model gives you more information on, they're hydro flattened. What does that mean? What can you do with these? Well, the biggest thing is generate the contours You can also create a hillshade, which you see here on the left and what I showed earlier in my presentation. We also have that building footprint data, which is 2D, and we're also in the process of serving out 3D building data that you'll be able to use to better model, your environment and your local areas. We have the contour and topo data. Again, our data can support a 2-foot contour interval, and we do have some that are pre-processed, but we recommend that self-generation. Here's links to our learning. And then we also have some additional products and some additional LiDAR facts. So links to the USGS 3DEP program, the LiDAR base specification, which is the collection criteria. And now I'm going to move on to the projects. So this gives you a lot of information on, what the projects are, where the funding has come from, and how it's shared. So Tennessee, we have 100%, we do have 100% flown. It's not all delivered just yet. Very, very close. With 7 USGS products collected. We've got $10 million invested and a full 25+ terabytes of data being served out to the public. So that's huge, and more to come. This gives you information. Again, we participate in the USGS 3DEP program, the 3D elevation program. And that West Tennessee County Collect, again, this is the area that will be has been collected and should be finalized late summer 2021. Link to our map and then the project partners. We have lots of federal partners, local partners that have all chipped in dollars to make all these projects happen. So a big thanks to them, as well as the Tennessee Geographic Information Council, or TNGIC, that's helped store all that information, as I mentioned before. Here's a link to that training. We have that introduction to the LiDAR data, and then our video learning series, using it in ArcGIS Pro and using it in QGIS. I am going to click on this one just to show you kind of the breakdown. What it is we have an introduction, how to download QGIS. So where do you need to go? What do you need to do to start up? How do you add some basic data, and how do you add base maps? So this is some of this is GIS 101. Really, if you're not familiar with QGIS, this is a great, or GIS in general, a great learning opportunity. How to work with the digital elevation models, and then finally how to generate contours, and again, a matter of seconds for a square mile or more. Clip and then export to a CAD-based file format. So that's kind of the workflow and how it walks through. Some additional resources. USGS has some great training, and then same thing with TNGIC, which I've already mentioned. So clicking on our last one, downloads, probably the most important one, right? So big link to that web application, link to our data page, as well as the USGS national map. So USGS serves this LiDAR data out just as we do. They have some different file formats, etc. So always a good additional resource to think about. Also have some additional information and workflows. This is that, the big one for you surveyors that are on the call today is, generating the contours for engineering software surveying. So basically what you need to do to do that is download the DEMs for your project area, going to the coverage map, and then use that QGIS workflow and follow along, and you can just generate your own contours and export those into a DXF or DWG, whatever file format you need. And that basically just some additional information. I just wanted to touch on that one. That basically covers it. And with that, I know that was a lot of information. I appreciate your time and hanging in there with me. I'm going to provide all 3 of these links that you can use, after today, and provide those in the chat. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and put those in the chat and answer any questions. Did we have any come in, Joseph? Let's see. I'm looking through the chat. I don't see any necessarily. I'm going to go ahead and get those links copied in.
Yeah, one that just came in, Tom Brashear, asked is there any possibility of placing historic data on a map viewer?
Historic imagery or disaster imagery on the map viewer. I'm not familiar with what he's talking about as far as the map viewer. I'm not. Is that the property viewer, or is that's a comptroller? That's a comptroller Treasury product. I don't think that that we would be putting any of that historic imagery or disaster imagery in there. Yeah. All right. Sorry about that. All right, let me copy and paste. There is the link to the story map that I just presented. And then I'm going to give you a link to Tnmap.tn.gov. And Lidar.tn.gov, as well as my contact information. I'd love to hear your feedback. You know, if you use the information, if you have problems with the data, I'm happy to help and available. And I appreciate your time. Let's see, I think that was around 45 minutes. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. Any questions, feel free to shoot them to my email, and Joseph and or Suzanne, do you want to take a 5-minute break, or maybe folks can put that in the chat? I would assume that that we need that 5-minute break.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Clock just ticked to 9:55, so we'll be back here at 10 a.m. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave the presentation up, step away, stretch, grab some coffee, and then we'll get started at 10. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody. You're on mute, Suzanne.
Thanks, Paul.
You got it.
Good morning, everyone. Joseph, are we ready to get started? Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Very good. We'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. I am Suzanne White with the State of Tennessee STS-GIS Services, and I work with Paul, and we're part of the GIS Services group. I've been working with GIS since the mid-90s. Much of that has been in water resources. I've got an advanced degree in biology and fisheries management, and I've been working with flood mapping for the majority of this time with GIS, some of that time working with FEMA as a subcontractor building the flood maps. So I wanted to put together some information for you all to share today in a story map as well that has some hopefully useful links for you to guide you towards the GIS data that's available on FEMA's website, as well as some of the data on our website. So some of this overlaps a little bit with what Paul's got, but we'll go through it and kind of show you what we've got here. So for mapping resources for flood data in Tennessee, the first map that I want to show you, or web link actually, is the Map Service Center with FEMA. From here you can access the flood maps, the National Flood Hazard Layer, and the official flood maps. And so I'll try to do some of this live as well, but we'll go through this step by step. And within this story map, there's lots of links for you, and we'll share this link so you will have access to all of these links within as well. So once you go to the Flood Mapping Center, FEMA.gov, we go to download the firm panel. So let's try to do that live as well, but we can go over here to the msc.fema.gov. We can type in an address, a place, or coordinates. When you hit search, sometimes this takes just a minute. It will come up with your location. So you've got several things you can look at here, and we could go through showing all the products, making a format, which is a dynamic map, downloading the data itself, and plenty of other information there as well. So back to the story map. The flood insurance rate map is the official flood map produced by the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP, and this is a static publication as noted by this effective date. For this particular map, it was effective on 4/19/2010. The firm panel downloads to a zip file that contains the firm panel image as a TIFF, a spatial registration world file, which is a TFW file, and a README document. The TFW allows you to insert the TIFF image into your GIS system if you wish. Many of you may recognize this map here. It's the typical printed out firm map, and this is what you would download as an image file. So again, to access that data, you go to the map image download. You can also create a format. A format is a section of the firm map focused on your area of interest. It contains a title, a map legend, a scale, the bounding coordinates, and the current date printed. The format uses dynamic data from the National Flood Hazard hazard layer, which includes the map changes. So to get to the format, you type in your address, place, or your coordinates, and you click the Dynamic Map button. So it may take a few moments to generate the format, but the format can be printed and downloaded as an Adobe PDF file. So again, you can access the dynamic format from this link here, and it will use the address that I've already typed in. So if I click on that, let's see if it will go pretty quick. Sometimes being on a Teams meeting might slow things down as well. So this is the format, and you see it's already created for me a PDF file. It's got your title. It's got some bounding coordinates of this box. It's got your scale, your map legend, and the date that it was printed. So you can download this or directly print it. The format contains information from the National Flood Hazard Layer. The National Flood Hazard Layer, the NFHL, contains the current effective flood hazard data along with dynamic map changes. The NFHL is accessible in the map viewer for a more customized map experience. So the format that we just looked at is also working with the NFHL data, but it's just a quick snapshot of the address or place that you had typed in. So if we go to the viewer, which is located here, where it says go to the NFHL viewer, I've pulled it up. Sometimes it takes a little bit to load as well. We can type in our address. This is the same address I used before. It takes you to that area. It will draw up the flood layers. Then you can also go in here and create a format this way as well, but you have a little bit more control of where you want to place your point, what size of a map you want to print out. So I could drop my point in here if that's the area that I'm interested in, and it gives me an option of size. Do I want to create a format like we just did, or do I want to create the full firm? Also, it gives me an option for creating a PDF or a PNG file. So when you run that, it'll give you a link to the file that it created for you. Sometimes this takes a moment as well. I've got the map viewer loaded up within this presentation story map as well, with some additional links in here. So this is an external link to that map viewer. And then we've got information on additional GIS resources for your National Flood Hazard Layer. So down here you can connect back to the Map Service Center or go to that NFHL viewer. It also gives you plenty of other links to more resources and information. So we've got our output file, and I created a PDF. And so when I open that, and remember I created a full image instead of just the format, and you see that my area of interest was in this area right in here, but it prepares the entire panel. which again includes the current date, scale, legend, and other relevant information. And so with this, you can print it out or download it. Another option that's interesting are the flood map changes. I've got that viewer loaded up in here as well. It runs a little bit quirky and slow sometimes, so you got to work with it. But the big thing is it's not going to have any information in there for you unless you're in an area that's got preliminary data. So I've got this link in here just in case it becomes useful to you. You can also access the data, the NFHL data, in the REST service, so you can add it into your ArcGIS or ArcGIS Pro software. So this is one thing that Paul mentioned as well just a bit. So adding that REST service into ArcGIS Pro, you go to Insert Connections, add your ArcGIS server, you paste the REST server URL into the dialog box, and then in ArcPro Catalog, you expand the servers folder, the map server on hazards.fema.gov.agis, public folder, NFHL, flood hazard zones. So loading this data may take a few minutes, and so I put a couple of images in here for you. So this one, if you click on the image on the side, it should pop out. And to do that, this gives you another option for adding your data in from the portal. And then once it's loaded into ArcGIS Pro, you can see how you can access it on the side panel and drag that data in. And let me see if I can open up Pro real quick for you. So here I've got this loaded in. I've got over in Catalog. This is where the map server on hazards.fema.gov has been loaded in. You expand the servers folder, you expand the map server for the hazards, and then you open the public folder, go to the NFHL layers, and within that, you're probably going to be most interested in the flood hazard zones, which is what I had just grabbed and drug and dropped into the map here, and that's what you see loaded in this area of Nashville. You may also be interested in the base flood elevations, the cross sections, the lomas or the lomars, or any of these other data sets you can load in as well. One thing to note with this, when you load in that flood hazard data, you have to zoom in pretty close to have that show up, because if you zoom out, it's going to turn off that data set at a certain scale. So you can see it when you zoom in, but as you zoom out, the scales change and the data goes away. So they're only showing it at a close scale. Again, to add in that data, you go up to the Insert tab, go to your Data Connections, drop down and go to a new ArcGIS server. When you click on that, that's where you cut and paste that URL from the REST service websites. And that'll take a few minutes to load, so just be prepared to wait for a little bit. So this is an example of the REST service directory. And so this one is for the NFHL map server. And again, you can look through this data set here and you can find your LOMARs or your LOMAs. You can go through here and find your base flood elevations, your flood hazard area boundaries, and then you go up to your URL and you copy that link and paste that into your ArcGIS Pro dialog box. So another way to get data from the Map Service Center is to go back to that same page where we had typed in an address, and you can do the show all products. So from here, you can download data to work with your ArcGIS instead of just linking to it. So when you download that data, you'll expand this folder here for effective products, and then typically most people download the entire county. You can download, if you need to, your firm panels, your FIS reports, and so on. But I typically go down to the NFHL data county, and it gives you the county, it gives you your effective date, and then when you say download, it'll create a zip file for you. And that will contain your GIS layer files. There'll be shape files, or there'll be file geodatabases, so you can add that directly into your ArcGIS software such as Arc Pro. The next thing I know Paul covered just a bit is the Tennessee map. Again, there's that link in here as well to the Tennessee map. In the Tennessee map, we do have REST services as well. So if you needed to go in and add administrative boundaries, such as your county boundaries, imagery, you can do that. There's some hydrography data that I'll talk more about here in just a minute. Structures, there's lots and lots of data in here that you can add in the same way we just added in the NFHL data. So I've got that in here as well. How to add in those REST services. Again, insert connections and you add your ArcGIS server connection. You copy and paste that URL into that dialog box. And then in the ArcGIS Pro catalog, you can expand the servers folder to find the ArcGIS on Tnmap.tn.gov. Again, loading this data may take just a few minutes. And so I've already pulled that data in for you. So here we've got the services on Tnmap.tn.gov. I expanded the environmental folder, and then I expanded the hydro features, and I just drug in the hydro features so you can see the hydrography in here that the Tennessee map has created. So this is a service for you that you can add in. And I've got some images in here to remind you how to add that data into your GIS software. I've got a link in here for the Tennessee Lidar page that Paul covered. And then one last thing that I wanted to cover, which was the Tennessee Map Hydrography. This data set here is, again, this is a image of that data, or it's actually a map server of that data in here. It's a excellent data source that is completely underutilized, in my opinion, that we've had numerous man hours that we've put into this, adding value to this data. So the data source of this was the Tennessee Base Mapping Program. The linear 1D and polygonal 2D hydrography features were manually derived using the 3D stereoscopic photogrammetry. Waterways that were over 25 feet wide were mapped as a polygon 2D feature. This data is essentially a local resolution with scales of 1 to 1200 and 1 to 4800. The data was built over the years of 2000 to 2006, and the Tennessee State Plane Coordinate System NAD 83 feet. And you'll find that in some areas this data is collected, maybe over-collected in some areas more so than others, and it was collected county by county. And so what you've got is when you do a county on this side of the state and then do one on the other side of the state, and over that period of 6 or 7 years, you have technology changes and improvements, data standards improve over time, you have personnel changes and whatnot. So you can see, where there's some county differences in there. But what's really important with this data is if you're in the local government, local community, you've got a hydrography source that you can use that crosses your jurisdictional boundaries. And the value added part of this, which is so important, is that we conflated the stream names and the water body names from the 1 to 24,000 USGS DLG data. We added flow direction. We added connectivity to everything. And all these streams are edge matched to adjacent state hydrography around the edge of Tennessee. So to access this data, we can download it as shapefiles in the Tennessee Map Open Data Portal. So I've got that link here. And it'll be the Tennessee hydro lines and water bodies. So you can download a copy for yourself, or you can access that, like I showed you just a minute ago, in the REST service, where you can add it in as a service into ArcMap. Again, go check out that data source. It's a great data source for hydrography data. And thank you for your time. And if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.